Jacksonville's mayor and Lot J developers are promising millions of dollars in economic impact from a big project at TIAA Bank Field in the parking lot, Lot J. But it turns out the city administration is not providing the documents to support those big numbers. More than $200 million in taxpayer subsidies have been proposed for this project. That is nearly half of its total cost. The development by JAG's owner Shad Khan would bring residential and retail, a hotel office space, and a live arena to the parking lot next to the stadium. On your sides, David Jones is live now at Lot J, and right now there have been a lot of promises made about this impact this project could have on jobs, on economic development in the city, and people are wondering, well, where are those numbers coming from?
Jeannie, both Mayor Lenny Curry and the development team have described this proposed project as a catalyst, and the mayor gave some numbers when they presented this just a couple weeks back at Daly's Place that would back up those assertions. Millions in annual output, over 1,000 proposed permanent jobs here at this complex. And during that same presentation, the mayor told a reporter to reach out to City Hall and to ask for those public records to be provided that would back up those claims of that economic impact amount. So that reporter asked for those records, but as of today, still we have not received any documentation, and neither has City Council, that would back up those claims.
I expected to have it before they file it. I mean, before we accept it. And all this information, they should know this.
Members of the Finance Committee with outstanding questions Tuesday. Council Auditor Kim Taylor saying she has yet to receive documents related to the Lot J project, which would show how the mayor's office and the developers arrived at some key figures, like $100 million in annual economic impact.
Typically, a lot of this information is information that we generally have when we get a deal, when we get legislation. So I may have presumed wrong that some of it was already available.
Still, no studies or projections have been given to council to back up impact numbers which have been touted by the mayor.
The return on investment is an uncertainty as far as the city of Jacksonville is concerned.
Council Finance Committee Chair Matt Carlucci.
It would be nice to have some market studies showing where they can back up these great promises that they're making about it.
Carlucci says he also wants to know how the future of the JAGs factors into all of this.
It's extremely important for our council auditor to have backup information on the viability and sustainability of Lot J with or without the Jaguars. Where do the Jaguars lead?
The council's auditor has another meeting set up with representatives from the JAGs and the developer. The Finance Committee's asked for a firm date on when these documents, when this information and these studies could be provided. The legislation, you may remember, technically has yet to actually be introduced at City Council because when it was first filed, the mayor's office did not include the parking agreement that would lay out how revenue would work for parking at Lot J. So definitely still a lot to continue to follow here. We're live at Lot J. David Jones, First Coast News, on your side.